You're listening to the Underdog Sports NBA Show.
Cross screen.
With hosts Tyler Laurie and Zandrick Ellison. Brought to you by Underdog Sports. Tune in every week as Tyler and Zan recap the biggest storylines and news in the NBA.
Welcome to the 57th episode of the Underdog Sports NBA Show. I am Tyler Laurie, and I am joined as always by my co-host, Zandrick Ellison. Zan, we were and are still going to preview the Northwest Division in the NBA, but we do have some international basketball going on. You're a big fan. Before we get to what just happened with Team USA in Turkey, how are you this morning?
Good. I'm glad that we're doing this because I was struggling to remember my ESPN Plus password. The stupid site. That's the only really way you could watch the World Cup. And then luckily we're doing this podcast, and you were, as a good millennial you are, you were able to screen share. So we watched the end of the game. U.S. pulling out a victory against Turkey, barely.
Yeah, 93-92 in overtime. Couple interesting takes. Tatum takes the last shot in regulation, goes 2 for 3 at the foul line, gets fouled, so they go into overtime. U.S. comes back from 5 down. Kemba Walker made a 3 and a 2 on back-to-back possessions. He took pretty much every shot in the half court. But really the story is Turkey, a bunch of opportunities to win the game. They get an unsportsmanlike foul after Miles Turner turns it over with 9 seconds left, up 1, miss the 2 free throws with no one on the line, then inbound the ball and miss 2 more free throws. Cedi Osman misses the 2 after that. U.S. gets it on a rebound. Tatum, great play, drives length of the court, passes to Chris Middleton, who gets fouled and makes 2 free throws, and then the U.S. gets a stop. But, man, I don't know. I have no idea what the BovadaSportsbook.com odds were for the U.S. to win this particular tournament. I also have gone on record saying that I don't really care about it. But, Zan, this team is probably – I guess they're the pre-tournament favorite, like you said, but you have some takes on whether or not they're a good value.
Well, I just think – it's why I love and hate the idea of international basketball in the World Cup. Because in theory, it's so fun to see all these teams and they care. So clearly, we were saying we were watching it. I think it would have been Turkey's biggest basketball win. I have to go back and look if they were medaled before, but to beat the U.S. would have been a huge deal. And just the format. The World Cup format's fun. You get to see all these international teams. It becomes a single elimination tournament, which is fun. The only thing I don't like is just the expectation for these U.S. players and coaches. You have to win every single game or else you're this massive failure. I don't think that's a fair standard anymore. And so I tweeted, I said, I do think there's a big difference between saying, a lot of the hot takes are the U.S. isn't the best team anymore. U.S. isn't that good anymore. It's and the U.S. should be expected to win every tournament and every single game against the entire field. I just don't think that's a realistic standard anymore with the improvement in international play.
Yeah. Plus, I think it's very tough for, I don't want to get into a nationalistic discussion here, but yes, this U.S. team is likely the best team in the field. No, they don't have the best player. Giannis is obviously playing for Greece, who, by the way, lost to Brazil today. But it's unlikely. I think just looking at these rosters and just expecting this team to roll over everybody is really not understanding. But we mentioned this before. This NBA team, yes, it's composed of mostly starters from NBA teams, but it doesn't have any superstars on it. It probably doesn't have any top 15 NBA players, depending on if you think Donovan Mitchell or Kemba can take a jump, or Jason Tatum for that matter. But they also have good NBA rotation players. They did try to build this a good team, but this particular team, if you put it in the NBA, I don't know that they probably don't win the NBA title. I don't think it's the best team.
I don't think so either. But also, I think to think that they're going to easily win betrays 2 things. International players, this, of course, we talked about this. They're not NBA players, maybe, but they're not that much worse.
No, yeah.
The gap is pretty narrow, and certainly compared to the Mason Plumlees of the world, or the Derek Whites of the world. And then also just the format of international basketball, it's shorter game, shorter line, becomes a one and done single elimination tournament. You could be the best team and still not have an over 50% chance of winning a tournament like that. It doesn't matter which team you are. And we talk about Golden State, we were on Bovada, thinking we were going to bet Golden State this year because they were clearly the best NBA team prior to Durant's injury. And it was minus 150 or something like that. And that factors in the 7-game series, which negates any sort of randomness or some of it. And so, like, I think in a 7-game series, like, this Team USA would be a comfortable favorite. But in this format, I don't think any team should be considered, I don't know, maybe the 60% chance of winning, but I don't think it should be much higher than that.
Right. And I do think the other thing to consider is, like, one, these guys haven't played together a ton. Like, you're just kind of assuming, like, hey, we're going to throw this team together, where some of the national teams have played together a lot. Like, they do. I mean, that was the thing with, like, Slovenia a couple of years ago in the Euro Cup, like with Doncic, Luka, and Goran Dragic. Like, they had played together a long time. Like, those guys had been in their national team system. And I think with this team, like, yes, a lot of these guys have played USA basketball. Obviously, Greg Popovich is a good coach. Like, we were joking about the coaching staff. It's like Pop, Steve Kerr, Jay Wright, Lloyd Pierce. Like, they're very good. But at the same time, they've practiced, 2 months? Is that even as much? I mean, how many real games have they played? They lost to a team of G Leaguers because, like, the talent level is just not that different. And I think
they're going to lose. If they played 82 games in this format, they would lose 10 times. I just think this is like the thing that really bugs me just about the idea of, I'm not being a nationalist. I think it's just a rationalist. If you tell me the U.S. isn't the best team in this tournament, tell me the team that's better, and then we'll go head to head. If it's Serbia, you think, or Greece, or somebody like that. Probably Serbia is one of the favorites. That's fine. You take Serbia, I'll take the U.S. I like my chances. If you tell me that the U.S. has to win the tournament or else they're not the best team, like, that's not a fair standard.
Yeah, I joke around about this a lot, especially as we're into baseball season, and, like, baseball has 162 games and basketball has 82 games. Like, you are allowed to not win every game. Like, that's a very realistic thing. And unfortunately, the expectation set by USA Basketball when the rules changed and you could use professionals was that they are going to win every single game. And we've seen that not be the case when guys haven't wanted to play. Obviously, the 2004 we've talked about before, that lost to Puerto Rico and ended up getting a bronze. Like, that team is in a similar situation. I thought they tried to build this roster better with the lack of stars, but this team doesn't have one player as good as Tim Duncan or Allen Iverson.
No. And there's a lot of, like, I like Harrison Barnes as an NBA player. There's a lot of Harrison Barnes type players on this team, in the sense that, like, they're pretty good, pretty good shooters, or maybe average NBA shooters, pretty good defenders. Like, there's a lot of pretty good players on this team, and that's hardly a guarantee of success.
Definitely.
Forget that. So we're talking about the was it the Northwest Division, is it called?
Yeah, I had no idea that was the title of this division.
But here's my crossover, tying it all together. Would Team USA win the Northwest Division? Because it's a tough one.
Well, the problem is, do we take the players off the team? Like, obviously, Utah is in this division, and we will talk about them. But, like, if you take Donovan Mitchell off Utah and he plays and just replace him with, like, Royce O'Neal, Utah's a lot worse. Maybe not a lot worse.
Oh, of course. But, like, clone them all.
That's good.
I think they would still win the division, but this is a pretty stacked division on the top. I mean, we're talking about technically 4 of the top.
Well, 4 playoff teams last year. They were
4 of the top 6 seeds in the West last year.
Yeah, correct. This division's a lot of fun, and I would guess they get 3 playoff teams again, just right off the top. But we'll do it the same order. Tell you their over-under record last year, talk about their lineups, like who's new, who's going to contribute, best case, worst case, league pass rating, and a couple bold predictions. So we will start with the Minnesota Timberwolves. 36-46 last year. Zandrick, their Bovada over-under is 35.5. That seems about right, as they did not make a ton of changes. Couple new faces. So Jeff Teague, Josh Okogie, Andrew Wiggins, Robert Covington, Karl-Anthony Towns is what I likely would expect their starting lineup to be. I'm not so sure what they're going to do at the 4 spot, but out is your guy Tyus Jones, in is Shabazz Napier. They drafted Jarrett Culver. They also got Jake Layman in that deal. They drafted my guy Nazi Reed, signed Noah Vonleh, still have Katie Bates-Diop, signed and still have Gorgie Jang, and not a whole lot to like on the second unit. So you love Karl-Anthony Towns. Convince me that this team can make any noise.
Well, I do love Karl-Anthony Towns. I think he's oddly maybe the most underrated player in the NBA. Just because he's, like, toiling away on this bad team. It's just his offensive potential and offensive production is outstanding. I mean,
special. It's special for sure.
I mean, it's a stat we overuse maybe, but it's just amazing. I mean, he shoots 40% from 3 as a center and on a high volume. And he's done it the last 2 years now. It's not like a fluke. and he's still grabbing 12 rebounds a game. He had 3.5 assists a game last year. He is an MVP caliber player, I think. But in the next couple of years, obviously, if the team won 55 games, that, you could maybe argue the reason they're not winning 55 games is partly his fault. But just from a narrative standpoint, like, he has MVP potential offensively. If the team gets better, I'm not quite sure how that's going to change. I don't know if there's another level he could get to, because offensively he's as good as any center in the league.
Yeah, I eyeballed what I thought a jump for him would be without actually looking at his stats. I mean, this is a guy, like, we're serious, like 42% from three 2 years ago, 40% from three this year. He averaged, I mean, as a 21-year-old, the guy averaged 25 and 12 on 37, 58, or 37, 54, 83. Like, it's ridiculous. And I put, like, Cat takes a big MVP jump to like 27, 14, 5, and then like 4.5 blocks and steals a game. And he's not that far away from that. Like, he averaged 24 and 12 last year. It's very possible that he can do that.
And then also the other thing that's underrated about Towns too, compared to like your boy, Joel Embiid, he's played 4 years. He's missed a total of 5 games over 4 years.
And he plays a ton of minutes. I mean, with the Thibodeau, everybody does, but even last year, 33 minutes a game, like, he's a guy that you absolutely can look at. And we've argued about it. Is he a top 10 player in the NBA? He's probably not quite there because the results really haven't been there for his team, but he's 11, he's 12, like, he's right there. And
well, and let me give you the optimistic take, because so Towns, I mean, expecting him to take another leap is probably too optimistic. But this is a team 2 years ago when they had Jimmy Butler that won 47 games.
8th seed in the playoffs, right?
Yes, and they beat Denver for that spot. And then offensively, they were ranked 4th, partly because of Karl Anthony Towns. And their defense never really got to the level it needed to get to. But last year, they traded midseason for Robert Covington, who I think arguably he's probably a better defender than Jimmy Butler at this stage. And like, the stats bear that out. Philadelphia's defense was better with Covington than they were with Jimmy Butler as well. So if you put Covington on the court all year, he was injured for a lot of last year.
They put 22 games, I think, with Minnesota.
Yeah, so maybe if their defense gets a little better, and say Jarrett Culver, optimistic to say, as a rookie, is a solid defender, maybe Towns is just good enough to carry the offense, and the defense is average, and then you make the playoffs.
Yeah, that was exactly what that was, like, legitimately my best case scenario. Was like, Towns gets himself into the MVP conversation, maybe wins MVP if they win. Wiggins is, like, engaged. They play him more at the 4 spot, and he looks like he cares on defense, and it's not a lot of empty stats. Maybe they play him a couple less minutes to make that happen. You look like you have a guy like Jarrett Culver, who you said exactly, like, it's another guy in the wing who can replace Jimmy Butler, and I put Robert Covington stays healthy. He's all defensive first-team guy. And, like, maybe they win 48 games and they get, like, 6, 7, or 8. I don't see it, because, I mean, the problem for me is, like, their depth is so bad. Like, even if you think, and that's like a lot of NBA pundits, I won't really call us that, but, like, the Andrew Wiggins stuff, it's just well known at this point. Like, if you think Andrew Wiggins is going to be a good NBA player, like, you just are unaware of, like, what makes somebody a good NBA player. Like, and at his contract, being a good NBA player is, like, damn near impossible, because, like, even if he becomes, like, a 3-and-D wing who actually wants to guard and who makes a high percentage of threes and doesn't take bad shots, you're still paying him $30 million a year for that production that you can replace elsewhere at, like, $7 or $8 million a year. So, like, unfortunately, Andrew Wiggins is just a sunk cost at this point, Zan. Wouldn't you agree? Like, there's just no,
I don't totally agree with that.
Well, you're never getting a good return on your investment.
No, he's overpaid. That's a sunk cost. He probably wasn't worth the number 1 pick. That's over. Can't get that back.
Correct.
I think Andrew Wiggins, this is like the lane I see for him. Because, it's interesting to think. I was just looking at, for one, he's also durable. Congratulations to him.
He plays a ton.
Yeah. In 5 years, he's missed less than 10 games as well over the course of, 5 years. That's not inconsequential feat when you're playing 36 minutes a night. I think they really have to change how they use him. You look at him, before Jimmy Butler came over, he was sort of becoming, not a superstar, not a good player, but maybe like a bootleg DeMar DeRozan. Like, he was getting to the line 7 times a game, scoring over 20 points a game, not shooting that well, but his efficiency wasn't that bad, actually. a few years ago. He peaked, to 54, 53%. That's below league average. But, for a guy who was 20, you can kind of excuse it. And then ever since Jimmy Butler came, it's just like completely like eroded his role and his confidence. His free throws are way down to 4 a game. And that's just the only way he can score efficiently. So if he's not doing that, then he's becomes a very bad player on both ends. So I think the way to do it is either you get him crashing the line again, or you start thinking like maybe he's a bench scorer or something, and just like, he's not the 3-and-D guy. He can't 3 and he can't D. So you have to find another role for him. And if they can't, just trot out the same thing that they've done the last 2 years because it's not working. Yeah,
that was one of the things I actually wrote was I did think Ryan Saunders would likely play Wiggins less. I mean, we're 2 years removed from this guy playing the most minutes in the NBA. And again, at some point you have to recognize, we don't want this guy. There's no more, what can Andrew Wiggins be? We need to utilize what he is. And again, he's still 20. He's going to be 24 this year. So it's not like the guy is, totally washed. It's just that, you're not getting this big-time wing who can carry you to the playoffs. And the good part about that is you have Karl-Anthony Towns who can absolutely carry you to the playoffs. So figuring out what's next around him is important. And I will say this, I don't know if you follow Andy Glockner on Twitter. He used to do Bubble Watch and stuff for Sports Illustrated, but he actually proposed, would Minnesota trade Towns to get off Wiggins' contract?
No, that's stupid. But
I don't think it's stupid as much as I think it's you just it's just really tough for Gerson Rosas to come in and trade a guy who you could conceivably see being a top 5 player in the NBA and Karl Towns just to get off a mistake that somebody else made.
I don't know. I don't follow Andy Glockner, but I might block him from that take. It's just stupid. Karl-Anthony Towns is 23, 24.
Well, I disagree with it being stupid.
If Karl-Anthony Towns, let me tell you why. If Karl-Anthony Towns stays in Minnesota, which may be a reach, who knows? We could be reaching that point. I don't know if that's one of your bold predictions that he could want out at some point soon. But if he stays, you're talking about a guy who's going to be good given his skill set for 10 years. And even on a max, underpaid for 10 years. So the idea of, sucking it up and paying Anthony Wiggins more than he is worth for the next few years is worth it to me. I don't think you win in the NBA by trading away superstars to get off contracts. I
don't know. I really don't know, and I think the issue is how you view Karl Towns, and do you view him as wanting to stay in Minnesota? Do you view him as a guy who is going to continue to get better? There is the whispers that he doesn't love basketball. I often think that those are, it's tough. It's just hey, they don't win. And Karl Towns is production.
I don't care if he hates basketball.
But if he never wants to get better and you're never going to win with this.
What does he have to get better at? He's not a great defender, but I just don't know if he has I don't think he has the tools to be an elite defender. Some people disagree with that. I just don't think he's not Nerlens Noel or Anthony Davis light on his feet. He's not that guy. I think he could be a functional, okay defender, but I think he could be a Nikola Jokic on defense. I mean,
so let me ask you a question. I think the issue is where we stand on Karl Towns, and then we'll get to some bold predictions, because I don't think they're going to trade Karl Towns. Now, he may request a trade. That actually could certainly happen. He may want to say hey, trade me to Brooklyn. I want to play with Kyrie Irving, and you can have 2 of the more mercurial stars in the NBA play together. But I think the issue is if you don't think you can win with this core, then you can actually conceivably look at that and be all right, well, we can get some money. He proposed DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge for Towns and Wiggins, because you get a better version of Wiggins, and then LaMarcus Aldridge is only $7 million on the books for next year. So then you have money more. You have money sooner. You also are able to build a little bit more of a culture. And then you can put yourself in the picture of maybe competing in 2022, 2023, which I can't see that.
No, you can't. I mean, this is so stupid. Honestly, no one's going to Minnesota. Okay, you're never getting a free agent. You got to hope to get lucky in the draft. You're not getting a high pick in the current world we live in, or in that world we live in where you just made that trade. So if you want to win a title, the lane is there. I think that's what frustrates me so much about Minnesota. I think it's such an easy template, and that's why I called him a sleeping giant in the past. Karl-Anthony Towns is the best shooting center in the NBA. He's the one stretch center who's actually really good at stretching the court. And he can score in other ways as well. He shoots 57, 58% inside a 3. You just put a bunch of 3-and-D guys around him, you're a playoff team easily.
Why can't they do it?
I don't know. It's like Giannis. It's if they built the team like they're building Milwaukee around Giannis, this team should be really good. The problem is, as we mentioned, Andrew Wiggins isn't a 3-and-D guy. And then they just traded up for Jarrett Culver, who I think might be similar, like he's supposed to be a good defender, but we'll see if that translates. He's not a good shooter. So now you're adding 2 non-shooting wings around Karl-Anthony Towns.
Their point guards stink. Like we have Shabazz Napier's not a good NBA point guard, although he showed some signs of life last year. And then Jeff Teague is just, that's who he is. Like we've watched a ton of Jeff Teague. It's like, you're a league average guy. Like, I don't know, man. Like, what's the worst case scenario for them? Like getting the first pick in the draft is like not a bad thing for Minnesota, obviously.
I don't think that's realistic because they're too good.
Oh my God. I think they could be the worst team in the East or in the West, excuse me. Like I would comfortably bet them to be one of the worst 3 teams in the West.
Well, it's contradictory because I love Karl-Anthony Towns, as you can tell. Like I do think he's one of the most underrated players. I think he's a building block that I would keep, not trade for DeMar DeRozan. But I just hate the team. I hate the team that they built around him, as we talked about. Like neither of us like Jarrett Culver, and to build your team around Wiggins and Culver, it just doesn't. The two of them don't make sense together. It would have made sense maybe if you traded Wiggins, but it's a janky team. If
they truly believe that Culver is like a legitimate combo guard, then like I get that pick, and I get it at 6. Like we talked about the depth of this current NBA draft. Like I don't love Jarrett Culver. I just don't see it personally, and I absolutely could be wrong. People are wrong all the time, but they do need somebody who can handle the ball on the wing. And, I think they need a point guard really bad. Like we joked about, like, were they drafting Darius Garland maybe? Like, why weren't they trying to get in on like Nickel Walker-Alexander? Was Kobe White not a fit? Because they do need some more spacing, obviously, for some of their wings. But I don't know. Like, obviously the worst case scenario is Karl Towns says he doesn't want to be in Minnesota.
Right. No, I think that's the most realistic. Because, like Anthony Davis, like, I don't know if Karl-Anthony Towns likes basketball or not. It's hard to say. I guarantee you his agent and his reps, the guys who tend to get in their ears, are like, look, we have a guy could put up MVP level stats, regardless of whether he deserves MVP or not. And he's toiling away on a team that neither of us think are going to make the playoffs. Neither think we're going to go 500. And it seems like such a waste when he could be in New York.
I think this is a stone cold lock under. Like, I think this is one of the best unders, especially because
it's 35. You said they won 36 last year, and you think 35 is the over under?
It's 35.5. And like, here's the thing, and this is why. Like, I honestly agree a lot of in your thinking. Like with Minnesota, and I think Gerson Russell knows this. Like, this is a pretty yes, it's a rebuild, but right, you have Karl Towns. You have him for 4 more years, so like you're not as far away conceivably if you can mix and match some other pieces. But like, if you just play this season and they win like 34 games and like nobody really takes a jump and Culver just looks okay, like that actually might be the worst case scenario where it's like, holy crap, like Covington's a good player. People like him. Karl Towns is a great player. People love him. And then like, we have no other pieces to put around these guys. And now we're another year into Karl Towns's contract.
Yeah. That's the worst case is to be forgotten because the team, like when they made the playoffs, like everyone thought they were sort of like the rising, maybe next to Oklahoma City or something, like they would keep going and going. And to take a step back, I agree. I think I would slightly go under, slightly. I don't think it's a lock of it by any means. Because I look at it like Karl-Anthony Towns is carrying this team. And I can't guarantee any player in the NBA plays 80 games a year.
So and he shouldn't.
This is 10 games. They go, 2-8?
He shouldn't do that.
And so it's just...
You think Karl Towns is like one of the best like 6 players in the league? Like you're afraid to do it?
No, I don't think so. I think he's on the same level as like elite centers. I think he should be like an all NBA, like 3rd team guy. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Especially at the center spot. And he played 100%, like 99% of his minutes at center last year, and they'll play him at the 5 a ton anyway. And I do, like I said, I do think that like, you have to explore a lot of options to like clear up cap space because like with that Wiggins contract, like if you just play it out, like it kind of sucks just because of you just kind of cut into your years with Karl Towns. And so it is interesting to think like, okay, could they convince the Wizards to like go with Wiggins instead of John Wall? And like maybe Wall comes back from injury and you get lucky and you get 2 years of that. I don't know. I really don't. It's just such a bad deal. And at the time, everybody thought it was a bad deal. So
no, well, and this is like with in terms of my, put a pin on my like, Karl-Anthony Towns love. I would say this definitively. I would, in the future, you give me a 10-year contract, I would take Towns over Embiid just from durability standpoint.
I think most people would do that. I do think there are some things with Karl Towns that make him more of a liability than people think. But I don't want to get into like the behind the scenes speculation. Like, how I feel about stuff like that. I wouldn't bet on Karl Towns long term I think there's more to that than people think. But anyway, bold predictions. Obviously, we weren't going to get through a podcast without me talking about Naz Reid. I think he starts 30 games for them. They need another 4-man who can.
Wait, can you tell people who Naz Reid is? Because I don't think they know Naz Reid.
He played at LSU. They drafted him late, like in the 50s or whatever. They signed him to a 2-way deal, and then he got a 4-year deal because of his summer league play. They're hurting for a 4-man. I do think they should play a lot of like Covington, Okogie, Wiggins together at the guard spots and the 4 spots, like, and next to Towns. That's great because then you do have some more shooting and spacing. But I think Naz Reid's going to play a lot of minutes, and I think they're going to invest in him. And as a guy who's hungry and trying to prove himself, I think he's going to do a really good job.
He's hungry.
He does like to eat. I also think with Ryan Saunders, I also think they're going to be. I think they're going to end up as like a top 8 offense. I think defensively they're going to be a mess, and that's going to be the biggest problem. I think this team's going to really score, though. I mean, you just can't with Towns. Like, you're already so efficient. So I think I'd see them as like a top 8 offense, and I do think they'll play a lot of like Covington, Wiggins, Naz Reid, Jake Layman at the 4, and I think they're going to be fun to watch.
Naz Reid's funny because if you watch him or you see him in the tournament, probably he what was he, a freshman? Was he a freshman?
Yeah, he's a freshman. He's young too. He's 19.
He looks like 45 years old.
He looks very old, and he had a bad body. Yeah, he had a bad body.
He's been to the buffet. If you know the food court at LSU must be pretty good. My bold prediction. This is what I want them to do, because we talk about like Andrew Wiggins. There's a way to use him to kind of like jack up his stats and just like give him the ball. He scored 23.5 points a game a few years ago. What I want them to do, and I hope they do, is like take your lumps, try to inflate his stats and deal him if you can to a team like the Wizards, who, you know, I think it's possible. I think, or Charlotte. I think you could trick a team into taking Andrew Wiggins. And if they don't do that.
The issue with this statement, and again, I'm totally with you, like in a vacuum, in theory, it's a great idea. You got to find somebody who's going to give you $30 million worth of either like money that comes off the books or like assets. And who the hell is trading for that?
But you don't think Charlotte would trade, Charlotte who's starved for star talent, and they maybe trick themselves into thinking Wiggins is that, they wouldn't trade like Batum for him or something?
Well, you can't do that.
Batum makes $25 million. So you could throw in Batum and Gilchrist. That's more than enough money.
Why would they trade a guy that comes off the books for a guy that's on the books for 3 more years?
Well, Batum's on the books for 2 years.
Yeah, maybe.
Cody Zeller, 14 and 15.
I wouldn't trade a guy who I think can actually play in the, like, who's a good rotational piece.
No, I'm not saying Charlotte should do this. I'm just saying that, like, it happens.
Yeah, taking advantages of bad front offices is the key to being a good GM. So, like, if Gerson Rosas is good, maybe he makes it happen. League pass rating, what do you got?
Oof. I'm kind of curious as to see how Jarrett Culver is, just because it's one of those cases where I just feel like so like opposed to like common consensus. Like everyone thinks he's a top 5 prospect, and I don't know if I would have taken him in the lottery. So I want to see if I'm wrong there, and I might be. I certainly have been in the past. But other than that, there's not much reason to watch. I'd give him like a C-, D+. All
right, I did C+ instead of C-. So I did say that. Like, Towns is amazing. He's super fun to watch. Like, he's going to have some huge games. I do think they'll play less Andrew Wiggins. Like, I think Ryan Saunders is going to do that. I think obviously like the organization believes in him. His last name is Saunders, so he carries a lot of weight around there. Like, I think he's going to get a chance to try some different things. I think they'll play hard. Like, I think Covington and Okogie and Jake Layman, like those guys play really hard. And so I just think it's going to be really hard to watch their second unit. I think they're going to be really bad. So like maybe watch them in the first quarter and then like in the fourth quarter.
The disappointing part is just in the West, like, I don't think there's any real scenario where this team makes the playoffs.
I agree.
So you're going to watch a team that's like 30 and 40. Like, you're not going to do that in January.
Totally agree. All right. Oklahoma City Thunder. Last year, 6th seed, they were 49 and 33. This year's Bovada over under, which seems just absurd considering this team is definitely better than Minnesota. 31.5. That seems very low to me. If they keep together, we don't know.
Usually it was off the board. I didn't know that they even had one.
Yeah, I just looked this morning. So, because there's been some changes, obviously, since we started doing this the last 2 weeks. But, all right, everybody knows at this point, CP3 in, Russell Westbrook out, traded for Danilo Gallinari, Jeremy Grant out. My shot at their starting lineup, I'm not 100% sure what they'll do because, again, they have a lack of, like, depth forwards, but Chris Paul, Terrence Ferguson, Andre Roberson, Gallo, and Steven Adams, and then contributors. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that was one of the big on the Gallinari trade. Dennis Schroeder is still there for some reason. He will play. Hami Diallo, they drafted Darius Baisley, Mike Muscala, and then Nerlens Noel is back for another year of good production in 11 minutes and us not figuring out why someone won't give him more money to play a bigger role. What do you think? This team is good, not great. And I don't think they'll be together at the end of the year, but like, I really, truly don't know what the best case scenario is for this team. I'm not sure what they think, Zan. Like I wrote that, like not sure.
I don't know what they think because they kind of tore half down. You know, it's like a house that you tore down halfway through and then you kind of, you know, went out for a cigarette break and you came back and you're like, I'm not sure if I want to keep going with this.
Right.
Or,
yeah.
I'm shocked by that over under though. 31.
That seems I think that's banking on the fact that they're going to try to move Chris Paul, or more likely they're going to move Gallinari in the middle of the year. I think that's probably it. And he's going to be, whether or not he's their best player, like he's definitely their best asset to get immediate help next year or the year after. Chris Paul's contract, obviously very tough to move. Steven Adams would be a very interesting thing to look at. He's a good player.
You know, it's shocking to me because they haven't made those moves yet. And I think they want to. But, you know, barring that, this team as constructed right now would be a 500 team. And
I think so. I think they're 40 wins for sure, right?
And I would even go this far. Say you subtract Chris Paul. Like you get nothing for him. You know, you take back, you know, empty space. I still think they'd win 35 games. Like I think this team's not terrible. I mean, you're talking about Gallinari, who's maybe, you know, I said it about Karl-Anthony Towns. Gallinari might be the most underrated player in the NBA. He had a really good year last year. And we're talking about a defense that finished 4th last year without Andre Roberson, who might be, you know, one of the best wing defenders in the NBA. Like their defense is going to be really good.
It will be. Yeah, it will be good. Obviously, like they lose Paul George. That's a huge difference. Like,
but Westbrook was kind of a gambling bad defender.
Westbrook was like league average. Chris Paul is a better, like on point guards, Chris Paul is a better defender. I think, you know, in Houston, we talked about the size issues. Westbrook might be better in Houston than Chris Paul was, but Chris Paul is still a good, capable NBA defender. Like certainly possession to possession will be a better defender than Russell Westbrook was. You lose the defense, you know, you lose like the defensive rebounding and stuff, but you gain more in terms of staying in front of your guy, contesting shots, steals, stuff like that.
And just talk about like a Ewing theory. I think the best case scenario for this team, or if they wanted to compete, like there could be a scenario where they end up like the Clippers last year, where it's like, hey, this team was supposed to be tanking, they're supposed to be terrible, and somehow they're winning 45 games just because they have pretty good pieces together. I don't really see the depth here in the same way. Like they still have real problems shooting. Roberson's not going to help that out at all. But there's enough veterans on this current team to win 40 games. I don't know what. I think the 31 is betting on not only are they trading Chris Paul and they're trading Gallinari and maybe they're trading Steve Adams, but also that they like Presti tells them tank at the end of the year and they lose like 18 of their last 20 or something.
Could definitely happen.
It could happen, but like it's not right now. I mean, it's
also hard to like outright say that they're going to tank. I want to see like what is the current Minnesota Timberwolves pick situation? Like, because this is a team that like, would they trade Wiggins for Chris Paul straight up because they want a point guard and like include a pick with it for Oklahoma City to do that? Because like conceivably, if you want to tank, getting Andrew Wiggins and getting something with him, that's a really good way to lose games, Zan. So like, would Presti consider something like that to get off Chris Paul? It helps Minnesota. I don't think so. I just don't really.
Well, and also Presti, like we know Presti, you know, we talk all the time about mid to late first round picks being overrated. So I'm sure Sam Presti knows, and he's done it in the past, the way to build a potential dynasty is to get a top 5 pick. So he's going to want to do that at some point. I don't know if he right now he's not going to be able to do that right now.
Right. They have their first round pick in 2020. So like they could do something like that. Or Presti could be like, give me Wiggins and give me your first round pick in like 2028 because I'm going to be the GM for life. But like, I do think this is an over. I really don't know what they're going to do. I think the worst case scenario for sure is like, I agree. Best case scenario, like I think I think they can go a lot of different directions, but if they want to compete for the playoffs, that's fine. I think their best case scenario or worst case scenario is like Schroeder and CP3 hate each other. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander like doesn't really play as much as they want. Like the culture is not very good. Terrence Ferguson can't make a shot. Like And then you realize like, oh crap, like, yes, we already know this is a rebuild, but like we have no pieces to build around.
Yeah, I think you touched on like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is an important piece here. And if he, people really hyped him up. I heard a lot of people talking about him being a potential future All-Star.
People think that. I think the consensus around the league is that he is a future All-Star for sure. I don't know that he's a future like all-league guard, but I can see him making some All-Star teams. I think the package is interesting for sure.
He has tools. I mean, this is just a high bar to guarantee you. He had 10-3-3 last year. If he kind of stagnates, and then you start to look at him as just sort of like a starter, then I think that's like the worst case scenario, because then you don't have any future stars on your roster.
I don't know. What do you think? What do you really think about this team?
It's interesting. I mean,
how about this? Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I they want to tear it down. I just don't think they're going to be able to. It's like the half-built house or half-torn down house. Like I know they probably want in their heads to tear it down and become a top 3 pick, but like I just don't think they're capable. There's too much talent and not enough time to trade them all away. So I just don't see them being able to tank and win 15 games in the way that I might want.
So do you think Presti is going into this year saying, I need to move all 3 of Chris Paul? I need to move all 3 of Chris Paul, Steven Adams, and Gallinari. Or do you think he's thinking like, all right, this year the only important person to move is Gallinari, and we'll take what we can from the rest? Because again, Chris Paul not being a first-team All-NBA point guard and not being the same quality of Hall of Fame player that he actually is now doesn't mean that Chris Paul is a terrible NBA player. He is still a good NBA point guard.
I think he wants to move Chris Paul first, just in the sense that Gallinari's been, around the league and he's going to be an expiring contract. So he doesn't, I don't think he minds the idea of scoring 20 points per game for Oklahoma City and getting a big contract somewhere else next year. Worst case for him. Chris Paul has a long-term contract. He's high opinion of himself and high, salary. And, he probably wants to compete for titles. He hasn't won yet. He might not like play for them. Like I could see a scenario where he just like sits out games and like disgruntled. So I think you don't want that kind of player in the locker room.
The metamorphosis of Chris Paul from like as a high school player in 2004, like when his grandfather died and he scored 61 points on his grandfather's 61st birthday, and like everybody loved him, happy guy that smiles a ton, to like who he is now, of like people being like, oh, he's always angry, his teammates hate him. He yells and screams at officials. Like it sucks, because like Chris Paul's a really good NBA player. Like I said, I think he's pretty close to being a Hall of Famer if he not already is. Like I'd have to look at it. He definitely is, I think, a Hall of Famer though.
But like, would the NBA allow this? Because remember, they blocked him going to the Lakers before. If they can't find a taker for Chris Paul at his current salary, and they say, look, we'll cut our losses. He's set to make $38 million, $41 million, $44 million. If they buy him out for, let's say, $30 million and a year, and then he goes to the Lakers, like, would the league allow that?
That's the most hilarious kind of thing, is like, if you buy him out now, I just don't see them doing it. Like Oklahoma City is it's a market that we've kind of talked about this. We haven't really dug in, and I don't know, financially speaking, we never know, but like that team could not be there. Like they could move Oklahoma City. It's entirely possible. So like, you probably need Chris Paul, and you certainly can't sit on, $30 million of dead money a year. Like that just doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know. This is
the them versus Minnesota is interesting. So like, as presently constructed, do you think they would be better than Minnesota?
I think they're 10 wins better than Minnesota.
Wow, that's bold.
Minnesota's roster stinks outside of Karl Towns. They have like 3 good players. Seriously. This Oklahoma City team has like legitimate NBA rotation players and in my opinion, like 3 very good players. Like I think Chris Paul, Danilo Gallinari, and Steven Adams are all 3 very good NBA players, starters on almost any team in the NBA. I also think like Roberson is a good NBA player. He obviously can't shoot, but he helps them. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, I think, is really good. I think Darius Bailey has a chance. I think Nerlens Noel is very good. Like this team has good players.
Yeah, but you could also make the argument Chris Paul's going to miss 20 games a year at least.
Maybe, yeah.
Gallinari is going to miss 20 games a year. Roberson has missed a lot of time. So they could just turn it over to like the Fergusons and Diallo and Darius Bazley, like, 100%. Go super young and just kind of bite the bullet on the contracts. So there's so much uncertainty. I don't know if I would feel comfortable betting that over.
I think it's a stay away because you just don't know what's happening to the team.
Right. Like, and if they trade Chris Paul for Tyler Hero, maybe they win 30 games. So I don't know if I'd really love it, but locked in time, we both agree they're better than 31 wins.
It's interesting. I want to say like 3 weeks ago, we talked about like, would Tyler Hero make sense to go from Miami to Oklahoma City? And I was like, yeah, I could see them doing that. Like OKC, blah, blah, blah. And then as I looked at Miami's roster and looked deeper at Oklahoma City's roster, like, I don't think I'd even consider trading for Chris Paul if I was Miami. Like, I
agree with you. Dragic is not terrible.
I like their team so much better with the pieces they have moving forward with Jimmy Butler than I do like adding Chris Paul. Now we'll see how that goes this year, I think, right? Like we'll see.
Say this, that like that's why I try to float the Lakers. Like Chris Paul on the Lakers fits in a limited third role, and I think he makes them title favorites.
He fits a lot of places. All right, bold predictions. I have one that's not bold at all, but here it is. Danilo Gallinari plays in the playoffs for another team.
Like, that was going to be my prediction for another team we'll get to. I think he'll get traded in the division. Let's just tease that.
That's good. That'll be good discussion and as we continue to, we're going to have a 2-hour podcast because of this. But he's not going to be there. And then the other one I have is we're not going to have a fist fight on the sidelines, but I would say less than 10 games on Bovada if there's an over-under of when Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder get into an altercation on the sidelines. I got less than 10 games. So I would say that is one that I'm just waiting for. Like we turn on NBA TV or Inside the NBA and Shaq and Kenny are breaking down the two of them screaming at each other at like game 8. So,
my bold prediction is Chris Paul is not on the team at the end of the year. I don't know if that's bold anymore, but I think it could happen in midseason or some sort of incident or something where they just finally just dump it.
All right. League pass rating. What do you got?
Mildly curious about this team. I'll give them a C just because of the odd pieces.
That's what I have. C. They'll play slow with Chris Paul. Adams will play super hard every night. Roberson will play super hard every night. Gilgeous-Alexander, it'll be interesting to watch him. I like Darius Bazley. It'll be interesting to watch him, but probably not enough good players. Like this feels like a 40-win team if they play the whole season. Maybe 43, maybe 44. They've got some veterans with Guile that are pretty good. Guys, we got to take a quick break to talk about Podcast One, and it's time to turn it up with your new favorite podcast, Expeditiously with T.I. here on Podcast One. Join the rapper, entrepreneur, family man, and activist as he bridges the gap and sheds light on important social topics and much more in an authentic, eyebrow-raising dialogue that might make you want to pull out your dictionary. Download new episodes of Expeditiously with T.I. every week on Apple Podcasts and Podcast One. And now, back to the Northwest Division.
Now we get interesting because now we're in the top 3 and they're all teams that won 50 games.
Correct. All right. We will do the Utah Jazz, right? They were 50-32 last year. Their Bovada over-under this year is 54. That is tied for the highest in the Western Conference with the Clippers, who have gotten bet down by half a game, and then Houston, who has gotten bet up by 1.5 games since we first started this, although we didn't talk about that yet. But that is a lot of wins in a conference where the teams are going to beat each other up, 54. All right. Who's in, who's out? In Mike Conley, in Bojan Bogdanovic, in Jeff Green, in Ed Davis, out Ricky Rubio, out Grayson Allen. Does anyone care about that? So starters, Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, Rudy Gobert. Contributors, my guy Dante Exum. Emmanuel Mudiay is a new addition to them. I think he'll play a little bit. Royce O'Neal, Jeff Green, Georges Niang, Ed Davis, Tony Bradley. They're deep. They're good, Zan. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, it's funny, the NFL, you talk about fantasy and predicting the NFL. The thing that they all statisticians and analysts all agree, analytics guys, defense year to year is kind of variable. You shouldn't count on like Jacksonville's defense being like number 1 every single year, that it goes up and down. The NBA is quite different, I think. And Utah, the last few years, has finished 3rd in defense, 2nd in defense, 2nd in defense. You'd expect that to continue. And I think the key to them was just like, we have to improve our offense from mid-pack. We need more spacing. Rubio to Conley's an upgrade in that regard. Favors to Bogdanovic is a huge spacing upgrade.
Oh, yeah. Out Derek Favors. Totally forgot about that. Good player, too. Sorry.
Yeah, but just in terms of like playing him a power forward, like they just added a bunch of shooting. And on paper, their offense looks like it should be a top 10 offense. Their defense will be a top 3 defense. I could see the argument that this team is going to be a number 1 or 2 seed. 54, you said was the over-under?
Yeah, it's a big number.
That's too high. But
they may do it, though. You know what I mean? Like, they may win more than 54 games. Like, it's very conceivable.
Yeah, the concern is that, like, are they a better regular season team than postseason team?
Boy, we have been doing this podcast a long time. We have a lot of the same thoughts. I'll just give you this right now. Like, my bold prediction is that they finish as the number 1 seed in the West, and then they lose in the second round of the playoffs. Like, I think this is a regular season team. I like them. They're so deep but like depth is usually much better in the regular season than it is in the playoffs. Like, yes, you want depth, but when you don't have a guy like Kawhi Leonard to kind of like pick you up when you need it, like sometimes that depth just doesn't work. So like their best case scenario is quite honestly, like they win the NBA title. Like they're good enough to do that. Like, and I think like Rudy repeats his defensive player of the year. Mitchell takes another jump to like an all-league guard. Mike Conley is really a missing piece. And I do think we're going to see a lot of that stuff. Like, remember, they started slow last year. And I think we're going to see a really good team. Like, I was very bullish on this team last year, and they got to 50 wins, and they're better this year. But I don't think they're the blueprint to win the NBA championship in today's NBA. And I think that's because I don't believe in Donovan Mitchell this year as the type of guy that can carry you in a 7-game series just yet. And I'm not saying I'm not saying he can't get there. I do like Donovan Mitchell a good bit, but I don't see it yet. I see a lot of like volume shooting nights, and I think that's very hard to overcome in the playoffs. Whereas in the regular season, when coverages are different, I think this team can easily win 60 games. Like, I think it can happen. I almost feel comfortable in saying that I would like to bet the over 54, even though I think that's high. But I do think that's their best case scenario is they win the title. You can see it with this team.
Yeah, we do share a brain at this point, and maybe because we just watched Team USA and Donovan Mitchell. That's the key. I mean, Mitchell, he went up. He improved marginally year 1 to year 2. I mean, he got to the line one more time a game. He went from 20 points to 24 points, but a lot of that was just shooting more. Shot 3 more times a game.
Right. And he did improve his shooting percentage, right? Like he shot like 43.5% from the field this past year, which is
about the same and his 3 went up slightly from 34 to 36, but his 2 went down from 50 to 47. So overall, you're talking about
what was his usage from year to year?
His true shooting was basically the same, 54.
What was his, you have it in front of you. What was his usage percentage as a rookie and as a second year player?
Let me look that up. Usage 29 to 31 and a half.
That's a lot of possession.
Yeah. And that's my concern is like Mitchell, for a second year player to get average 24, 4 and 4. Wow. That's great.
It is really great. It is really great, by the way.
No, it's good. But it's also a situation where he was not only the clear go-to guy, he was the clear go-to guy on a team that didn't have any offense around him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you add Mike Conley, who's used to having the ball for the last 10 years of his career. Maybe Mike Conley comes with less of an ego and says, look, this is Donovan Mitchell's team. Let's get him 25 points a game and I'll just be a complimentary guy. Realistically, they're going to carve into each other a little bit. And there's so much hype about Donovan Mitchell after Team USA. He's like the leader of the team, maybe not after the Turkey game, but in general, like people are expecting this sort of MVP breakout. Bill Simmons is comparing him to Dwayne Wade in his prime. I agree with you. I don't quite think he's there to take over a playoff series when he's, say he's playing against James Harden in this series. Like James Harden is a few notches ahead of him, right? And so that's a hard hurdle to overcome.
And that's not a bad thing either, Zan. Like, I know you're not saying it is. I just want to like go on record and say that like we love, like if Donovan Mitchell takes that next step and he really is Dwayne Wade, Simmons has been saying that for now, but like if he is that guy, like that's great for the NBA and it's great for Utah. But like Mike Conley's probably going to put up the same numbers he's put up, maybe a little bit worse, but he might actually have a much better season. You know what I mean? Like he may be better this year than he has been in Memphis, but I think we're going to see a lot of the same. I do think he's going to make an all-star team this year just because I think the hype around Utah is going to be good, and I think they're going to win a lot of games. They're going to be good defensively. I really like Quinn Snyder, but there's something with this team. It's not that they feel soft. I just hate saying that. I just feel like you do have to get down to like, hey, can we win an ISO? And Donovan Mitchell is not yet that guy.
Yeah, I agree. He's never been an all-star team, right? Has he not? Is that true?
Donovan Mitchell? I don't think so.
I don't believe he has. I just wrote an article about this, so I should know. But and neither is Rudy. He's been in league 2 years. He has not made the All-Star team. Rudy Gobert has not made the All-Star team either.
But like, look at the guards in the West though too, and that's the thing.
And neither is Mike Conley, by the way. That's interesting. The whole team of non-All-Stars, projected.
Rudy is legitimately one of the 10 best players in the West.
Yeah, no, I agree. But in terms of Donovan Mitchell, like, I think he's a star. I think he's a legitimate all-star. But when I think he's like so far behind, like James Harden, he could have like a breakout super leap this year, and he would still need another super leap on top of that to get to somebody like James Harden's level or Steph Curry's level. It's a different level of caliber of impact right now. So I would just go slightly under just based on the fact that I think they could be the number 1 or 2 seed and win 52 games. I just think that's a hard number to hit the over on. And I agree with you. I don't think the conference finals is guaranteed though, even if they get that number 1 or 2 seed.
Yeah, I think their worst case scenario is just they lose in the first round of the playoffs. Like, and it would have to, if they don't, like, the injuries and stuff like that could happen. But like, this team's too deep, in my opinion, to not make the playoffs. Like, I would be stunned if they were like 46 wins and like competing for the 8th spot. Like, even if they did lose Rudy for 30 some games, and he's their best player, Mitchell's their second best player, Conley's their third best player, and like Mitchell, you know, if he averages 24, 4 and 4, but he improves his percentages because like Bogdanovich has another year like last year, I think his percentage will go down. Joe Ingles has another year. Conley comes in and takes some of that share. Then like we may see Donovan Mitchell take another leap without actually improving his stats. And I think that's a really important.
No, definitely. The efficiency is where he suffers, you know, like, and what I said about Andrew Wiggins, like the key is crashing to the line, but like, the extra spacing might help him do that and might help him convert around the rim a little bit more. You know, his 2-point percentage went down, like I said before, 50 to 47% per game.
Right.
And I think because that's with extra defensive attention, and his true shooting was below league average both years. So he can't be a league average scorer. That's just not a way to win a title.
Yeah, I agree with that. And a lot of it was just like you said, like they just really didn't have any other options. My big concern for this team is that they end up doing things like Ed Davis is really good. Like he needs to play. But like Jeff Green, not a really good player on good teams. Like maybe he doesn't play quite as much. Like I would be interested in seeing them do the whole like play Mihai Oni, play Georges Niang, like play Royce O'Neal. Like don't just like burn minutes on Jeff Green and stuff like that. Like you don't need that. Like you have veterans. This team is very deep, as I keep saying. Bold predictions, like I said, number 1 seed in the West, and then I think they get upset in the second.
Yeah, that's a great prediction. I think it might. I'll tell you something. I wouldn't rule out a round 1 loss. I mean, like, you know, we can debate Houston at some point. You know, there are big changes, but Houston's beaten Utah the last 2 years, 4-1 and 4-1. So has Utah improved enough to change that kind of fate? I don't know.
I almost put lost in the first round of the playoffs. I just do think that like there are 7 really good teams. If they get the 1 seed, I think they should beat the 8 seed unless something crazy happens in like the Lakers or like the Rockets or some team like that.
I'll go a little bolder than you. I'll say that they'll get the 2 seed and then lose in the first round.
Okay, fair enough. And then league pass rating, like I put them in a A-. I think the only thing is like sometimes I just don't like watching Donovan Mitchell, and that's why. And I don't want my bias to come out here, but like I did write like no like transcendent offensive star, which obviously makes the team a little bit more pleasing to watch. But like I said, tons of depth, top 3 defensive player in the league. They have a bunch of shooting. They have really likable guys. That's another thing with Donovan Mitchell. His teammates love him. The fans love him. Like I think he's a great ambassador for the NBA. I think Quinn Snyder does a lot of really cool stuff. I think they're going to be a good team. I think they'll struggle a little bit offensively early to kind of find an identity. But this is a team I think that'll be a lot of fun to watch.
So who's next? Who do you got? You have 2 more teams.
What do you have for league pass?
League pass rating? It's not a fun team to watch. I'd like to see how all the spacing works. I'd like to see them go small. You know, you talked about Jeff Green, like just play, you know, Ingles and Bogdanovich. I'd like Royce Neal a lot. I think he's a great defender, and just rely on Gobert holding down your defense. If they play that way, they could be a B+. But in terms of just watchability right now, it's like a C+.
That's interesting. All right. Portland Trailblazers. Surprise conference finals additions last year. 53 and 29 last year, but their Bovada over under this year is 46 and a half, excuse me.
Their over under is 46?
46 and a half is their over under.
I in my brain I thought you said 56 at first, and I'm like, that seems high, and then 46.
I might have misspoken, said 56, but it's 46 and a half. They added Rodney Hood midseason, but he is there and will conceivably play a lot of minutes. Hassan Whiteside is a new addition. Kent Bazemore is in. Anthony Tolliver is in. Out. Reverse Ant-Man, sadly, is now down in Miami. Myers Leonard, we talked about him. They also got rid of Evan Turner, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Mo Harkless. Guys that contributed. My assumption is their starting lineup will look something like Lillard, CJ, Rodney Hood, Zach Collins at the 4, and then Whiteside until Nurkic is healthy, because we don't know if he's going to be healthy right away, but he will obviously be the starting 5-man. Contributors, a couple interesting guys here: Anthony Simons, Kent Bazemore, Gary Trent, Tolliver, maybe Scala Biciere, and then Whiteside. Again, he'll play a lot of minutes, but whether he's a starter or a bench player. This is a super interesting team. Like I said, 53 wins last year, 53 wins the year before. Terry Stotts is really good. Lillard is awesome. It feels like last year was their best case scenario. I don't know that they can do that again this year with this team.
Well, I agree. It feels like a similar team, even though they changed a little bit of the roster. I'm just shocked by that over-under, though, because, I mean, the West is tougher, but you can't tell me this team is materially different than last year. And it seems like Vegas just like perpetually underestimates the Blazers. And I just looked on Basketball Reference. 2 years ago, over under 42 wins, they won 49. Then last year, over under 42 wins again, they won 53. So for whatever reason, like Vegas is continually underrating this team by, 5-10 wins a year. I don't know if they're going to win. They won 53 last year. Let's say they win 50. That's still comfortably over that over under.
I mean, Zan, just for the sake of like the gambling argument here, this team since 2013-14, they have won less than 46 games twice. So in the last 6 years, they've won 44 games once and 41 games. 54 wins in 2013-14, 51 wins 14-15, 44 in 15-16, 41 in 16-17, then 49 and 53 the last 2 years. Like that's a really good team. Like
yeah, and it seems like them and San Antonio, I think, are similar. Like maybe because they haven't made big changes, major changes that people just like don't get excited by them. But I just don't see how you could argue that this team is 7 games worse than last year. It doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, I think the argument.
I mean, Nurkic played well last year, and people don't like Whiteside, but Whiteside is, as far as like a plug-in center for 1 year, I think he's fine. I think Bazemore is an improvement on Ivan Turner. I think Rodney Hood's kind of underrated.
I like Rodney Hood. I think Rodney Hood's a good fit for them because he can shoot, he can swing between the forwards and guard spots. Like I like Rodney Hood.
And talked about my bold prediction. I mentioned it before. I do think they're a really good team for Danilo Gallinari to add some shooting at the power forward spot. And if they get that would change this team's ceiling. But even as is, I think they could win, even conservatively 48, 49 games.
Yeah, that's what I put as my best case scenario. Like, I think this team, what we saw last year is very close. Like, they get right around like 50-ish wins. They get to the conference finals. I don't think it's going to happen this year, though. Like Lillard is probably one of the best dark horse MVP candidates because you could see him like scoring 33, 34 a game and they win 53 games and the narrative, really helps him. But I don't think this team can do that. I think the rest of the West is much better than they are. They got some injury luck last year with other people, and then like, again, they had a ton of injuries, like the Nurkic injury. We kind of wrote him off. We talked about him for a long time and they get to the conference finals, but like, I just don't see it. I wrote about this in bold predictions. I agree with you, but I don't think it's Danilo Gallinari because they signed CJ and Dame Lillard to max contract extensions, and I don't think that they're going to trade for a guy who's on a 1-year deal. I think the play is Kevin Love. That's what I think, and I think you use Whiteside instead because, like, I think you need a guy to be part of your core with these two guys. I don't even think with Gallinari they're good enough to win the title this year. They might be. It's anything can happen, but like. I don't see Olshey trading for a 1-year rental with the core of this team intact.
No, I agree. And then the fun thing about Kevin Love is it allows you to play different ways. Like you can play him at center and just have a great offensive lineup. You could play him at power forward. Zach Collins, I don't think is ever going to get to the point that his fans want him to get to. So,
he's an energy big. He's better as like their 5-man off the bench for sure. That's what I think at least.
But I just don't understand like the enthusiasm gap like between them and a team like Denver. Like I'll give you some stats here. Denver, everyone loves, darling of the NBA and the NBA fans and media. Portland last year had a better point differential, better SRS, and beat them head to head in the playoffs. So why is there such a gap between like people getting excited about Denver and Portland?
Yeah, it's a good it's a good question because I'm really excited about Denver, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, everyone is. But like Portland was, I think, at least even team.
Okay, here's why. Let me ask you this. If I said to you, which one of the teams has the capability to take another jump, which one of those two teams are you picking?
Well, I'll tell you something. I know the answer that you want is Denver. They're younger. Murray and Jokic are both under 24. But we carved out a lane here. If Gallinari or Kevin Love. Like there's a move that Portland could make to kind of click into place. But I agree, like based on youth and based on, natural improvement, you would think that the rising team in Denver.
They have to get there, like that's the problem. It's like we've talked about this before, like there's a couple teams that feel like they're one move away from really just like throwing themselves in that title picture. And I think Portland is unfortunately one of those teams that has to get there. I actually do kind of think Denver's there too. Like I think there's another move for Denver to really establish themselves as title contenders. But like with Denver, and we'll get to them in a second, like you could kind of wait with their core and be like, all right, they can take another jump and be Milwaukee of the West. Whether or not they do it, who knows? Maybe not if Michael Porter Jr. doesn't ever play. But I do think the worst case scenario for Portland, they have this unbelievable culture. Evan Turner was a great fit. Aminu was a great fit. Like they really like those guys. Bazemore will be awesome. People love him. Whiteside, a bit of a mercurial dude. Not sure how he'll fit. I think Lillard believes the team is really solid and was able to bring him in. But like if Nurkic is not the guy that he was last year, this team's a lot less exciting. So like, but even so, like 45 wins feels like the absolute, like kind of like floor for this team. Like, maybe they win like 43 if they have some injury issues.
I think Portland's a lock for the playoffs, but I think the negative would be
a lock. You think they're a lock? I think they could miss the playoffs. I'm not saying I bet on it.
This is also a team Portland has been swept out of the playoffs. They made the conference finals, but in the last series, they've been swept out of the playoffs. They're losing series 3 times in a row, including New Orleans, which was probably the worst. So if that happens again, if they get like demolished in the playoff first round, then I think you start debating big moves like, changing coaches or getting rid of CJ or something like that. I think that's the worst case.
Yeah. I mean, and they extended CJ. I mean, the thing is like they need Rodney Hood to be a pretty good third scorer. They really need Anthony Simons to like take a jump. They're super excited about him. But aside from that, like their bench pieces like Bazemore's good. Anthony Tolliver will make threes as a stretch 4. Like I said, you have Whiteside or Nurkic, one of those two guys. You have Zach Collins, depending on what they end up doing with the 4 spot. Like they have some versatility. Like this is an exciting team. Like they're fun to watch, but like they really need somebody to make them more excited about like, hey, we have a third or fourth very good player. Because right now I'm not sure with the Nurkic uncertainty if they do.
Yeah, and also like they made the conference finals last year. I think we all thought that was best case scenario. That was the easier side of the bracket. I don't think anyone thought they were a top 4 team last year.
And again, like I said, you're exactly right. Like they were as good as Denver last year. Like no question about it. They beat them head to head, but like there's a chance that they're not nearly as good as Denver or Utah this year. Like that's very possible.
So let's hear Denver. This is the last team.
We're not.
Oh, you're not done? League pass rating.
No. So bold predictions. You said they're going to trade for Gallinari. I said I don't think they'll do that, but I do think Olshey takes a shot, and I think it's Kevin Love. And the other one I have is I think Anthony Simons will finish top 5 in the 6 man a year voting. I'm pretty bullish about that guy too. Like I think he's got a chance to be really good as a young athletic guard. You can play him with Dame, you can play him with CJ, you have him be the primary creator. I think he's going to be very good, a guy that I am excited to watch. And then I think they're an A in terms of league pass rating. They have 2 guards who can totally fill it up. Lillard is so fun to watch. They love playing with each other. They play super hard. They have a bunch of interchangeable guys. And I think Terry Stotts is an awesome coach. Like Portland's on late a ton and they don't get a ton of credit, but I think they're super fun. How about you?
Yeah, and I'm interested to see Anna Simons. I like it. I'm glad that you got that in because that is a bold prediction. That's interesting. And they kind of made some sneaky moves. Like they didn't change the core of the team, the faces of the team, but just like for so long they've been doing like the Harkless, Aminu, Turner as their like forwards. So giving more opportunity for other guys to come in and maybe shake it up, I think is interesting. They have to be at least a B just based on like Lillard or McCollum getting hot every night, but that's as far as I go because I feel like I pretty much know what I'm getting from Portland.
I would agree with that. All right, Denver. Last year, surprise 2 seed. They were 54-28, and their Bovada over-under is 52.5. So Vegas is not quite as bullish as maybe nerdy sports writers such as ourselves are.
With you, speak for yourself. I'm not totally on board.
Only really one change, and that's they add Jeremy Grant, which I think is a pretty big deal. But starters, I'm not. Honestly, I was thinking about this. It's probably at the beginning of the season. It's probably Murray, Gary Harris, Will Barton, Paul Millsap, and Jokic. I think Jeremy Grant is probably better than Millsap at this point, although Millsap is very good. So I'll just put him in contributors. But contributors: Monty Morris, Malik Beasley, Torrey Craig, Millsap. Hopefully Michael Porter Jr., Juancho, Hernan Gomez, and Mason Plumlee. This is another team they are young, they are deep, and they are super, super talented. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those teams that everyone's expecting to take another leap, and I think Jokic is rightfully so kind of become mainstream. I think it took him a while. To be honest,
he was amazing in the playoffs. We talked about this.
Yeah, and he played a lot. And he's really been that player for a couple of years. Yeah, I mean, last year, his regular season was just as good as this past year, 2 years ago. It was actually a little higher in terms of true shooting percentage and such. But because they sort of crashed on that main stage in the playoffs and became the 2 seed, I think people got really excited about him. I just wonder, I'm a little less optimistic about the natural growth just because Jokic, I admit, is really good, top 10 player level. Do you think he can improve? Is there any other avenue for him to get better? I mean, he's 20, 10, and 7 kind of guy. I mean, that seems like who he is.
Yeah, it's a great question because the big jump for him is on defense because you could still see in the playoffs, you can target him defensively. Yes, he tries, he works very hard. They play him a ton of minutes, but you can pick and roll Jokic to death, and you may still lose the game because he's so talented on offense. But I agree with you on this on one thing, the natural growth. We talk about this a lot. Yes, these guys are very young. Yes, conceivably, Murray and Jokic aren't in their primes yet. Gary Harris could take a jump. They could have Michael Porter. I think that's the biggest swing part of this is Michael Porter going to be a legitimate 15 to 20 point per game scorer, or is he just going to be hurt and never play? But 40 wins 3 years ago, 46 wins 2 years ago, 54 wins last year. If they take another jump, this is a 58 to 60 win team. And maybe again, just all of a sudden they're like a sleeping giant. And
well, I don't think they're sleeping giant. This is my negative take on them. Jokic is 24 now. And so you naturally think he's going to get better and better. First of all, I don't know if he's 24. Let me check the birth certificate.
He's 24. Let's just say we're assuming he's 24.
Yeah, but I'm saying, I don't know. He looks like he's 28. I think he's in his prime. He is who he is. So the 2 jumps are either going to come from Jamal Murray taking a big jump. But again, he's a player who pretty much played the same the last 2 years.
He is also very young. Jamal Murray's 22 years old. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's possible. I'm not dismissing this. The way they get much better is Jamal Murray goes from a guy who gets, 18 points a game. He could be a 24 point per game scorer. I mean, he has that potential.
We are lockstep. Bold prediction for me, Jamal Murray, top 15 point per game guy in the NBA this year, 38th last year at 18, thinking he's right around 23 or 24 this year. That's what I wrote. I think he's going to take another jump.
Yeah, but the thing is, he needs to if they're going to get to 60 wins. Or Michael Porter, as you said, a guy who had top 5 pick potential conservatively, could be a 15 point game scorer. I don't know. He might play 15 games too. So
the thing with Denver that's super interesting again, and they are as deep as anybody as well. I think the Clippers, the Jazz, and Denver are just so deep. It's ridiculous. Those 3 teams. Every other team that I think is very good, your Phillies, your Milwaukee's, your Houston, Lakers, Portland. There's a drop off, right? There's I don't love their backup small forward and power forward, whatever. But those 3 teams, the Clippers, the Jazz, and Denver, damn, you look at their rotations, you're man, there are a ton of really good players here. And I think that the part with Denver that's so interesting is I don't think the Clippers or Utah feel like they need to make any in-season moves at least yet. Denver is the team that you could think of and be man, is Jamal Murray the guy? Is him and Jokic the pair? Or do we need to go get Brad Beal? Do we need to go get Kevin Love? Do we need to go get Blake Griffin? Do we need to try to get CP3? That won't happen. Do we, is Gordon Hayward a guy? I don't know, honestly. But I think Tim Connelly maybe is going to look at this and be all right, I got one big move in me here.
I hope he does. And I don't think he will, though, because, everyone's riding the high of this success. But I think they do need a Bradley Beal to really make waves.
Because I think the key is really quick, not to cut you off. The key is what do we get from Michael Porter? Because they also have Bol too. So they have these 2 lottery tickets sort of that they might scratch them off and they're worth $1, or maybe, they scratch them off and they're worth $100,000. It's kind of weird because I feel people are saying hey, Michael Porter Jr. is going to be great because all the people in Denver are saying he was awesome this summer, but he can't stay healthy. He was more of a volume shooter, I think, or volume scorer than I think people realized when he was in high school. Anyway, we haven't really seen him play basketball for 2 years. I guess if you really believe in Michael Porter, then you don't need to do anything. But if he's not the guy, they probably aren't going to take the jump from 54 to 60 wins because they were very fortunate last year despite all their injuries.
And there's sort of a ticking clock in this sense. Whether it's Michael Porter or Jeremy Grant or Vanderbilt or, they play 2 bigs with Plumlee and Jokic, Paul Millsap, who they signed to sort of put them over the top, gave him $30 million a year. He's there for another year. He's getting old. He's the one guy on the team that's old. And his points per game has gone down the last few years, 18 to 15 to 13 last year. And the minutes have gone down too. So it's not totally fair to say that raw stats, but he's also a guy who's injury prone now. So he's not going to be your third star for much longer if he's that now. So like, who's going to rise up and take his place, for this team to win 55 games for the next 4 or 5 years, which they have the potential to do. So is it Michael Porter Jr.? Is Jeremy Grant going to keep improving? If not, then you're having like sort of a sagging hole at one spot that you need to fill. And so I don't mind. I don't know if there's another. Kevin Love's not the answer, I don't think. But is there somebody else out there who?
I truly have circled 2 guys, and I think it's, like I said, I think it's Beal.
Yeah.
I think it's Ben Simmons, and I don't know that the Sixers would do it, but like maybe, like I think those are the 2. I was trying to look down the list of like who's available that definitely makes them better, because like Portland's not trading them CJ McCollum because like yes, he's better than Gary Harris, but like it's not like a substantial thing that like they need another wing scorer. It's like you really need another star. And it might be moving off Jamal Murray. Like that might actually be what they do. So,
well, it's kind of, it's funny because Denver, I think it's a fun city. Have you been to Denver? I like Denver.
Denver's a cool place. A lot of sunshine, also a lot of weird weather though, but sunny for like 300 days a year.
I'm just surprised that like, the cap situation that they'd have to figure out, but like a player like Kawhi Leonard, like why is Denver not ever a consideration for a player like that? Like he would fit in really well. He would be that like missing piece to lead them to a title for the next few years. I mean, I do think they need somebody like that. I think they need another star because I'm not like negative on Jokic. I just think he's sort of peaked, and even if Jamal Murray becomes CJ McCollum, they still might need another third player.
Right. I mean, the key is really like Jokic and Murray are already really good. Like Jokic is a legitimate superstar in my opinion. Like he's one of the 10 best players in the NBA. Murray not quite there, but like the key is like what's the next guy? Like because Gary Harris, good 5th starter. Jeremy Grant is going to be really, really good for them, and I think it's a super underrated acquisition as a guy that's like a cutter and a rebounder and a wing defender, and you play him at the 3 or the 4. He's much better suited at the 4. You get to play Millsap less, and you kind of have Millsap injury insurance. So it's really like, I mean, this team has contributors like, Monte Morris is a really good player. Torrey Craig, very good player. Malik Beasley, very good player. Like, that's why with their worst case scenario, like, I don't see a scenario they don't make the playoffs.
No, I agree. But I think this is a team like, I wish they might have been too late to make a move because last year, I think Gary Harris had that like peak value, and his shooting went down last year, and he's now, I think, been slapped with like the injury prone label. He's been about 60 games the last 3 years. And I don't think his value is as good as it was last year. So I don't know if they can use him to get like a Bradley Beal type, but I don't know. I guess I'm just not that excited about the continual upward momentum. Like they won 54 games last year. I think they're going to win about the same this year. Maybe 52 even.
It seems right. And, it's crazy too, because like they had a ton of injury games lost. I think they lost like the most games of injuries of any team. I don't know that stat off the top of my head, though. That I could just.
But 80 games for Jokic, so.
Right. And that's a part of it. Like they struggled without Will Barton for a little while. Millsap missed some games. But like, yeah, and their defense just cratered in the second half of the season. And they still, I think, finished 11th overall in defense. So might have been a little bit more of a flash in the pan. Like their real record last year, Pythagorean record, which again, we can take it or leave it, I think was 51 wins. So like I said, they could get to 55 wins this year and people could be like, man, why didn't Denver improve? But realistically, like it's a 4-game improvement over a larger sample and their peripherals are better and they're just a better team. Like that totally.
It reminds me of like Sacramento in that way, where it's like they overachieved slightly last year. So if they match, people think it's a disappointment. But I think there's an opportunity, like you said, for everything to click. Like if Gary Harris gets hot again and Jamal Murray takes a leap, then they could be the number 1 seed.
I mean, because that was the biggest thing in the playoffs last year was like, man, like Jamal Murray just wasn't the guy that we saw in the regular season. Now he had some good games, but like they got exactly what they needed from Jokic, even more so. Like he was unguardable, but Murray just didn't shoot it well. And I think like when you see a guy have a playoffs like that in his 3rd year, that's kind of the like, okay, did the light switch turn on of like, okay, this is what I need to get better at. And this is how I'm going to get better. And then all of a sudden he comes back and it's like, holy shit, like this guy's one of the best young guards in the Western Conference. And I don't want to write off Jamal Murray. I really do. I think the shooting's legit. I think the creativity as a scorer is really good. Like, I don't know if his ceiling is, Kyrie Irving as just a creator and a scorer. I don't think it's probably quite that good. I think it's close though. Like I really, really like Jamal Murray. I really like this team. Like I have him as a league pass A. Like they just have so many good players.
Yeah, they're fun to watch. And Jokic, like, there's some people who get like cheap assists, just because they have the ball. Did you call him the best passer or not?
I think he's the best. I think like it's like him, LeBron, and Harden. I think are the three like actual best passers in the NBA, just in terms of like creativity and where they put the ball, and they never seem to make mistakes. Like it's fun to watch, man. He's awesome. He's just so good.
I'll tell you though, my bold prediction is kind of a negative one, just because I like the team and I could see them making the conference finals, and I could see this team winning 55 games for 5 years in a row. I don't mean to.
You could conceivably like just bear with me for a second. Like you could see them winning the NBA title. I think we both agree like, it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but like they could win the title this year. This team is good enough to do that.
And they're fun, and they at their best they would remind you of like Sacramento Kings with Rick Adelman. Where
that's
you have
good.
Like, great ball movement team. I'll tell you though, my negative prediction for them is I think it's going to be similar, where they to what we talked about with Utah, good in the regular season. I think they're going to lose early in the playoffs though, and it's going to be to like a star team like the Lakers or something, and LeBron's going to get all the calls, and then Denver's going to go home disappointed, and I think Mike Malone's going to get some heat.
How much would you love to watch Anthony Davis and Jokic play against each other in the playoffs? Because like all the Lakers should do in that situation is just put LeBron and Davis in pick and roll on Jokic, but instead, because like they have humongous freaking egos, like Anthony Davis is just going to like ISO a ton. Like I would be so fun, man.
But I'll tell you that's what it's not only the depth thing like for Utah and Denver that makes me cautious of them in the the playoffs. It's also like the star factor. Like I do genuinely think like the refs not favor one team, but like there's certain sort of like, all things going equal, they're going to give it to Steph Curry. They're going to give it to LeBron James. And they don't have like that sort of national star. I think Jokic is better. His talent is better than his like star reputation. And sometimes like the European guys don't always get the calls either.
It's interesting though, like with Utah, they go to Donovan Mitchell in those spots, but like Denver, Jokic has the ball a ton, but I don't know, like down one, like with 13 seconds left in the game, do you run a play and let Jokic create and try to get it to Jamal Murray, or you give it to Jamal Murray? Like this team still has those types of things to figure out, I think. And that's what's going to be so much fun about them.
Yeah, but also, Jokic, you talked about, you could take advantage of him. So say you're Damian Lillard in the playoffs, say you're Steph Curry, say you're James Harden. I mean, I think there's a lot of teams in the West that could beat this team in round one.
All right, so what do we got here? I will give you my division predictions. I think it's Utah 1, Denver 2, Portland 3. I'm going to say for the time being, Oklahoma City 4. I would like a chance to go back and change that, but I'm going to say Oklahoma City 4, and then I'm just going to throw it out. Like I think Minnesota finishes with like the 14th best record in the West. Like I think Minnesota.
That's one of your bolder predictions of this podcast.
Their roster stinks, man. Their roster is terrible. But anyway,
I think my bold predictions. I think Utah will be the 1 seed. I think the defense is going to be there all year long. Denver 2 slightly, but Portland a close 3. I'll say Minnesota 4 and Oklahoma City 5, just because I do think they'll eventually tank. But my bolder prediction is I think Denver is going to lose in round 1. I think Utah might lose in round 1 or 2. I'm not as high on these teams in the postseason.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a really good division. It'll be a really fun division, but like it does feel like Utah might be better positioned to win in the playoffs than we think. And that, I guess, again, that really depends on if you think Donovan Mitchell can carry them for a playoff series, because Conley's been amazing in the playoffs when he's been there. So we might be underrating Utah a little bit. And I think I wanted to be a little contrarian with like the hype train, but like Utah, it doesn't feel like Utah is built quite the same as like the 2 LA teams or Houston. And I think that is where I kind of look at it and I'm like, okay, we know what those 3 teams bring to the table, but one of these teams has to make the conference finals, I think. Like it's going to be or Denver, Like is there another team in the West that you think is sneaking into the conference finals?
But riddle me this.
Go ahead.
My friend. Considering the hype and the love for Donovan Mitchell, who had a better true shooting percentage last year as volume scorers? Donovan Mitchell or everyone's punching bag, DeMar DeRozan?
I mean, I'm sure it was DeMar DeRozan. He gets the foul line. He gets the foul line more.
But like, so the fact that Donovan Mitchell's closer to DeMar DeRozan as a efficient scorer than he is James Harden. I think limits them until he gets to that stage.
It's also like a situation, and we'll talk about the Spurs in 2 weeks, but it's also like a situation where like the Spurs offense is geared towards that type of scoring, whereas like Utah, it's not really geared towards that. Like, and Utah is playing Ricky Rubio in a situation where they're trying to generate threes and spacing, whereas like San Antonio's like, hey, DeMar, like this is what you're good at. Like, let's lean into it.
Well, it's interesting, like, because I could see it, and I agree with you. Like, even though I'm being pessimistic, Utah and Denver just completely, I think they have the higher upside of this division. Of those two teams, which team do you think is most likely to win the title? Even if it's 5% chance, 10% chance.
In this division?
Yeah.
Utah. Utah and then Denver.
All right.
That is it for us this week. We will be back next week. I'm at CYS Tyler on Twitter. He is at Zan_Ellison. Email the show, ZandrickEllison@gmail.com. We'll be back in the lame Eastern Conference next week. Probably do the conference with we'll probably do the division with I don't know, the Knicks.
Okay.
I don't even know the divisions in the East. I think I have it up right now. We will be deciding between the Atlantic Division or the Central Division, and boy, oh boy, is the East terrible. So we'll be back. Like I said, shoot us an email. If you like what you hear, give us 5 stars. Shoot us up the ranks. It'd be nice to get a review talking about how much you guys liked us. That's super important for us. But other than that, Zan, it's always a pleasure. And we'll be back next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Underdog Sports NBA Show with your hosts, Tyler Laurie and Zandrick Ellison. Tune in next week for more NBA storylines and news.